Tigers and Aggies, we've got everything you need to know before game one. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available where you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe as always. One of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you for that. And thank you for being with us here as LSU and Texas A&M get set for game one of their 3-game weekend series in College Station. Tigers and Aggies. And this is one with two teams in dramatically different spots coming into this weekend series. LSU 37-9 overall, 14-7 in the SEC, ranked number 2 in the country. Texas A&M just 25-19 and 8-13 in the conference. After a slow start, they had series wins over Tennessee and Arkansas, and it sure looked like A&M was starting to surge. And then a week ago, Texas A&M went to Austin and got swept by Texas. That was a stunner. Texas is the number 1 team in the country, but remember, we found out the day before that series started that Texas ace Jared Spencer done for the year. You also had a surging Aggie team, a Texas team losing its ace, all the motivation of A&M going against Jim Schlossnagle, their former coach who left them for Texas, and the Aggies went and lost 3 one-run games. So they had pulled themselves out of the gutter to get to 8-10, nearly 500, and then boom, a 3-game sweep. And right like that, they're back at the bottom. But this is still an interesting weekend because this is a Texas A&M team that has a ton of talent. And you know a lot of the names because there's names that have been around Texas A&M and this baseball team for a while. Ryan Prager is still their ace. Dustin Lampkin's their number 2. Miles Patton is their junior lefty, who's their number 3. Jace Laviolette still paces this offense. You can run up and down with names you know. Wyatt Hensler, Caden Kent. This has been a team that got Caden Sorrell back, which has really infused life into them. Offensively, it just doesn't look super impressive because they're 12th in the SEC in team batting average at 276, but that doesn't tell the whole story because of their slow start. They're much better now than they were a month ago. The Aggies 7th in the SEC in team ERA, but as we're going to talk about here in a bit, they have one dominant arm in that bullpen, but if there is a weakness, it's the depth in that bullpen and something LSU is going to have to get to. But first, here was Jay Johnson on these Aggies.
Very talented team. A team that played for the national championship last year with a lot of really good returning players. Very familiar with them, very familiar with their roster. Has had a great stretch here lately. And what I mean by that is obviously, beating a couple of the top programs in the country, both on the road and in Tennessee and Arkansas, and played 3 really tough games against, number 1 team right now. So, Omaha team.
An Omaha team. They have the talent to be. Similar to Florida a year ago, where Florida was a team, if you remember, that there was a great debate as to whether or not Florida would even get in the NCAA tournament regional field. Not only did they get in, but once they got in, they made it all the way to Omaha. And this Texas A&M team is certainly capable of that. I'm not predicting that for this team because of what they still have ahead of them just to get into regional play. It's LSU this weekend. Then they get Missouri, which is 0-21 in the SEC, and that's a home series for A&M. And then they finish up at Georgia. So you've got 2 very tough series, and you got a layup if you're A&M. They're at 8 wins right now. If you figure a sweep against Missouri, because everyone literally has swept Missouri, that puts you at 11. Remember, LSU got in last year at 13, so in theory, if A&M could sweep Missouri, win 1 each against LSU and Georgia, you'd think that would be enough to be in theory. But a series win over LSU would be massive for Texas A&M, and that's something first-year head coach Mike Early knows, and knows a lot about these Tigers as well.
He's really good, really talented. I mean, their Friday guy is a really good pitcher. Guy I think is going to be a big leaguer. They got big leaguers in their lineup, and you got a guy like Jared Jones and Curiel, the freshman, and, Monster Milam, like just really good players on their offense, on their pitching staff, Chase Shores out of the pen. Like you're going to see guys this weekend on our team and their team that are going to be Major League Baseball players. So it's another weekend where you're not going to out-talent anyone. They're physical. It's not going to be easy, that's for sure.
Very similar to a week ago with LSU and Tennessee. Tennessee was a more talented team, not by much, but they're a more talented team than LSU. But you played two very close games, games 1 and 2. LSU had the big inning in the 9th in game 1. Tennessee had the big inning in the 8th in game 2. Then in game 3, LSU's depth took over. Casan Evans was the difference. When Tennessee had a bullpen day, Evans was awesome. So this is a little bit of a different type series as well, because I mentioned the starting pitching. And look, LSU has not yet named a number 3 starter. That's TBA. But you're going to have Cade Anderson against Ryan Prager in game 1, Anthony Ianson against Justin Lampkin in game 2, and then we know junior Miles Patton is going to go in game 3. But the interesting thing about all 3 of those guys is that all 3 are left-handed pitchers. So you are going to see 3 left-handed starters. Now, Jay Johnson was asked if seeing 3 lefties changes the approach, because remember, we've seen this lefty-righty platoon, but it seems like in the last week that has resolved a little bit, with Jake Brown starting all 3 games in right field against this past weekend against Tennessee and in the midweek, and you've gone a lefty-righty platoon with Ethan Fry and Josh Pearson. I can't imagine a scenario where Jay Johnson has Josh Pearson on the bench for 3 games because you're facing 3 lefties. So what he does there is going to be interesting, but Jay was asked about facing 3 lefties and if it changes his approach.
I think it depends on the pitcher. I mean, even all left-handed is not the same thing, and I would say that specifically even about a couple of these guys, in terms of how you attack them. And yeah, I don't, if I have looked, and again, maybe it changed a little bit this weekend. You get a game against a guy like Doyle that, he's getting you pretty good. But I think splits-wise, we've been pretty straight up. And the ability to match up has really helped us, you know what I mean, to get the right guys in the games at the right times. So I don't really think so. I think we'll prepare for the pitcher. The better the team, meaning, your own team or depth of the team, you can kind of negate some of that.
The better the team, your own team, you can negate some of that. You heard him talk about the matchups. Remember how he's handled the DH here, certainly last weekend, where depending if it was lefty-righty, they started Pearson or Fry at DH. But when you got that starter out of the game, you would see the platoon come in and the other guy would pinch hit. And then even later in the game, we saw even more guys come off the bench. If you needed a left-handed bat, here came Ashton Larson or Dalton Beck later, in fact. We even saw John Pearson take a pinch hit at bat from the right side if that's what you needed. So you've got options on that bench, and Jay Johnson certainly looks like he's going to exercise all of them. But I'm going to maintain, I don't care if it's a lefty or righty starting. Jake Brown needs to be starting in right field, especially on a weekend like this where you're on the road. You could end up playing very close ball games. You need your best defense out there and someone who can affect you on the base paths. All to say, Jake Brown gets on base. He can go first to third on a single. He can score from first on a double. He can steal you a base on a pitch in the dirt or a straight steal. He's got to be in the lineup. So I don't care that it's left. It's got to be Jake Brown in right field. And you figure out based on the matchups and the splits and everything else like that, what you do at DH. We'll see what Jay Johnson ultimately elects to do there. The other guy that's worth keeping an eye on is Weston Moss. So Weston Moss is their closer, and he's very good. He's the best guy out of the bullpen that they have. 2.37 ERA, but he's been battling a little bit of an illness. And Michael Early gave an update on Weston Davis on Thursday.
He's still battling. He's definitely in a better spot than he was on Sunday. So we've done some things, cut some things back, just trying to keep him hydrated and get some food in his body. He'll pitch this weekend. We just got to make sure it's in the right situation and make sure it's, he's in a good enough spot to do that.
I said Weston Moss. Forgive me. I got Weston Davis on the brain. Of course, the LSU right tackle I've been talking about all spring from spring football. But Weston Moss is the reliever from Texas A&M, who's had a good start to his career. In his sophomore season at Texas A&M, and is their best arm out of the bullpen. So it's a guy we're going to have to keep an eye on as well based on his availability. I would also say that for Jay Johnson, this is another example and evidence as to why you're going to want to get into their bullpen quickly. Maybe it's one of those things where you aren't as aggressive early in counts. You want to drive pitch counts up to try to get the starters out of the games early. If it's Prager in game 1 or Lampkin in game 2. So if you have the opportunity to do that, you got to make the most of that opportunity to run those starters out of the games early. So it is LSU and Texas A&M, Tigers and Aggies 3-game series. One other thing to keep in mind is that could very well see rain. There's rain in the forecast all day on Friday in College Station. So we could see a delayed game time as well, or a postponement. So just file that away. We hope that it clears and everything's on time, but file that away. It's something that we could see transpire in College Station on Friday. Okay, Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball gave his take on this game. Got to talk about the Casan Evans factor. Of course, leaving Sunday TBD tells you kind of what Jay Johnson's thinking, and perhaps a secret weapon lingering down there in the bullpen we'll talk about as well. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's over at supplyhouse.com. Few better in college baseball covering the sport than Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball. I have the great chance to talk to Kendall every single Thursday on my radio show After Further Review, and he kind of gave his thoughts on this A&M team and how they're approaching this weekend. Again, a team that just got swept, and they're going to go one of two ways. Either they're going to crater or they're going to have their backs against the wall, know it's do or die time, and how they're going to play the series against LSU.
I think for A&M, go into the weekend. I mean, they're obviously going to have really good crowds. I still think they're very offensive. They had plenty of hits against Texas. They just could not get a hit with runners in scoring position. Their starting pitchers threw well against Texas. I think the big key to this series is if you're LSU, Weston Moss, A&M's key reliever, was a little under the weather last weekend in Austin. My hunch is, he's probably getting over that or whatever illness he had. I think the key for LSU is get into A&M's bullpen. I think you'll see Jay have those guys take a lot of pitches to try to get those starting pitchers out of the game. That'll be the big key. But I think it's going to be a really good series. I think both these teams offensively are in a really good spot, and it's going to be up to the bullpens to kind of figure things out, which will make things interesting if Casan Evans does indeed start on Sunday, which, by the way, I do think he should start on Sunday.
Okay, so Kendall making it known, and remember, Kendall was in Baton Rouge for the LSU-Tennessee series. He thinks Evans should start on Sunday. I pressed him as to why.
LSU is in a position right now to where as long as they win an Arkansas series and don't play their last two weekends, they're probably a top 8. You're not going to get hit by losing a series 2-3 on the road to A&M. But I think as you look ahead of the postseason and you look ahead to the ultimate goal, in a regional and in a super, you want to have 3 starters that you feel you can rely on. And if I'm Jay Johnson, I do not want to go to a regional even putting myself in a situation to where I'm throwing Casan Evans out of the bullpen on Saturday, and then my Sunday spot is just, I wouldn't say it's a mess. I don't think anything LSU related on a Sunday was a mess in the past, but I don't want to leave any doubt. And I think for a freshman like that going into the postseason, I don't want him thinking all weekend, okay, what position are they putting me in the game in? If you go into postseason and Casan Evans knows he's starting on Sunday in the regional championship game, that's where his mindset is. It's not, okay, when am I going into the game? And so I just like the stability there. And here's my thing, Matt. I think if you're LSU, if you're going to win the national championship, guess what? You're going to need more than Zach Cowan out of the bullpen stepping up and providing meaningful innings. If he's the only guy doing it because you're starting Casan on Sunday, you're probably not winning the national championship anyway.
So I agree with him on that part, but it's why we've continued to say you're going to have to get some type of performance that you're not expecting. But I would push back also to the point Kendall made to say, if you're going into Sunday at a regional without an ordained starter, you're in a tough spot. I would also submit if you go into Sunday at a regional and you're not 2-0, you're in a tough spot. So how do you get there? Well, you win your first 2 games. So what if you're in the marble game of a regional? And again, all this is hypothetical because you don't know how it's going to play out. Ideally, LSU can pitch backwards in a regional. Now, they should have done it in 2023, but Jay Johnson threw Paul Skeens against a sub 500 Tulane team that had no business being in a regional, but for the fact that they pulled an upset and won their conference tournament and got in. I mean, that was like killing a bunny with a bazooka. You didn't need Paul Skeens for that, but Jay did it. So he's probably going to throw Cade Anderson game 1 of the regional in a 1-4 matchup, which means he'll come back with Anthony Ianson in the marble game. Well, what if you have a situation just like you did against Tennessee this past weekend with 2 aces that are dueling and you end up in a really close ball game in the 8th and you got to go lock it down? Well, who are you going to? You're going to Casan Evans, because if you don't win that game, great. You save Casan Evans, try to force, and if you lose, then you save Casan Evans for Sunday for a game that you got to win just to extend your season. And then you're in the same situation now playing a 4th game. So no. I think what Jay Johnson is doing is the obvious decision and the right decision, which is you keep Sunday open. And if you need Casan Evans to win one of the first 2 games, you use him to win one of the first 2 games. And if he doesn't pitch and you want to start him on Sunday, that's great too. But I don't think you're ordaining him right now as the Sunday starter unless and until you have more depth emerge in the bullpen that you can trust. And maybe that's Connor Ware, and maybe that's William Schmidt. Maybe that's Maverick Rizzi. Maybe it's Jacob Myers. You had tons of talent down there. But until it emerges and proves it can consistently deliver for you, you've got to lean on the guys that have the ability to close a game for you when you have the opportunity to close it. Now, one wild card potentially is Devin Sheeran. If you're an everydayer, shout out. You've heard us talk a little bit about this, but as a reminder, Devin Sheeran was a guy who was a no-star recruit. So he signed with Mount St. Mary's, little old Mount St. Mary's. Well, a funny thing happened. He goes to Mount St. Mary's and hit a growth spurt, as some 18-year-olds are wont to do. And all of a sudden, he becomes 6'5", and he's throwing 98 miles an hour. So he spends 1 year at Mount St. Mary's. He starts throwing 98, and then he jumps in the portal and lands at LSU. LSU's great benefit. By the way, Devin Sheeran was the number 8 overall player in the portal. Not the number 8 pitcher, the number 8 overall player in the portal in this cycle. But he tore his ACL before fall ball. This was the update that Jay Johnson gave then.
Devin Sheeran won't pitch this fall. He had a torn ACL, so we're not really sure on the timeline, for his return.
Not sure on the timeline. Well, he's chugged away. 2 weeks ago, for God and everybody to see, Devin Sheeran was out there throwing a flat ground before the midweek game. And then this past Tuesday, he was out there throwing again. And Jay Johnson disclosed that Devin Sheeran has been throwing simulated games. He was a guest, Jay Johnson was, on Off the Bench with Hester and T-Bob on Thursday morning in Baton Rouge on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. And Jay Johnson gave this update on Devin Sheeran.
He's throwing live, simulated games. And he's obviously got a great arm. It's just a matter of, there's a lot more to it to be able to put him in a game, specifically an SEC game, in terms of readiness. But we're excited about his health progress. Now, I think, a word I used the other day is just, the sharpness. We need to get it to a level where we feel good about putting him in a game. I think that day will come. I'm just not quite sure yet when.
So the day will come. Not sure when. Is it sometime in this season or is it next year? A couple of things that are worth mentioning. Number one, if Devin Sheeran throws one competitive pitch for you this year, that's better than none. And if you're sitting there worried about a redshirt year or something like that, you got to flush it. Because this is a guy who's 6'5" and throws 98 miles an hour. He's not spending 4 years in college. You're not worried about a redshirt year. So last year was his freshman season at Mount St. Mary's. This is his second year in college. He is draft eligible next summer. So after the 2026 season, and he will be drafted. I mean, he's 6'5" and throws 98. He's going to get picked. So you're going to have one season after this with him. So if you can get just one pitch out of Devin Sheeran this year, you do it. Now, I don't know if that situation is going to arise. You would love to have that opportunity in a midweek game to just kind of knock off some of the rust against live hitting. Well, you've only got one of those left. That's this coming week with Grambling coming in on Tuesday night. You could, in theory, if you've got a national seed locked up, run him out there in the SEC tournament, give him an inning, see what it looks like, give him a hitter, see what it looks like. You could use it like that. But I'm not telling you that this is a massive deal. It could end up being a gigantic nothing burger. That means absolutely nothing whatsoever. Or he could be a guy that throws 98 out of the bullpen when you need dudes that can throw strikes out of the bullpen. I'll just remind you about Chad Jones. Chad Jones in 2009 was playing spring football, came over after spring football, joined the baseball team, and established himself in a role where, he was a power hitting outfielder. Paul Maneri started letting him get the opportunity to go down the bullpen and throw strikes, and ended up using him in games and using him in Omaha. And he recorded some big outs for LSU in the championship series against Texas that year. I'm not telling you that's what's going to happen with Sheeran, but what I'm telling you is there's precedent to say it could happen. And there's no sense in keeping that dude on the shelf if he can give you anything. So I don't know when it's going to be, but keep an eye on the Devin Sheeran story. We will hear, because that could be a guy who you end up using out of the bullpen moving forward down the home stretch if he's able to go. Okay, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. We'll knock out our final breakout and update on the top remaining portal transfer that LSU is targeting in football. You're going to want to hear this next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. So this week we've talked a good bit about A.J. Halsey, who is a safety out of the University of Houston. And the latest update on Thursday from Pete Nakos is that Halsey is trending toward LSU. It is also worth noting that Halsey was down to LSU and Miami. Well, on Thursday, Miami took a safety commitment from the University of Tennessee. So that would, in effect, seem to indicate that A.J. Halsey is no longer considering Miami, since Miami took a safety, and that Halsey will be committing to LSU. Now, as we learned with the Bryce Underwood situation, and I hate to keep referencing that, but I'm going to, because it's just the extreme outlier to suggest it's never over until it's over. I mean, until ink is dry on the letter of intent or players enrolled. And even sometimes when the players enroll, it ain't over. You can look at Micah Hudson, the receiver who was at Texas Tech, entered the portals at A&M, left after spring, looks like he's going back to Texas Tech. So even when it feels like it's over, it's not always over in these situations with the transfer portal and NIL. But it seems as though A.J. Halsey is trending toward LSU. And if you heard our previous episode, shout out to all you everydayers who heard it. If you didn't, I would highly recommend you go back and check it out. Got plenty of updates this week on Halsey, the player, the relationships, all that sort of stuff. Halsey is a guy that showed up at the University of Houston as a 3-star, a lowly regarded guy, became a 3-year starter. He started 33 games during his 3 seasons at Houston, and now he jumps in the portal and is the number 2 safety in this transfer portal class. Well, you've already added to Marcus Cooley. If you had A.J. Halsey, guess what? You just got better at what was your weakest position on defense a year ago. I also told you the numbers. The on-3 NIL valuation has A.J. Halsey in the neighborhood of $400,000, maybe just a tick above. I was told that LSU's offer was more than that. So yes, what a difference a year makes. As Brian Kelly a year ago said, we're not in the business of buying players. LSU very clearly now is in the business of buying players, as they should be. It's the rules. Play by the rules that allow you to do it. Do it better than anyone else. And LSU in this portal cycle anyway has done that, having signed either the top or number 2 portal class in the country right there with Texas Tech. So LSU has improved themselves at every level of the defense and with the skill guys at offense and a tight end in Bauer Sharp, Donovan Green, a couple of offensive linemen. You know the whole song and dance. We've talked about it plenty, but there could be one more. It's A.J. Halsey, and I think we're expecting that decision to come down favorable for LSU. When it does, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked On LSU. Okay, y'all, that's going to do it for us here on this Friday edition of Locked On LSU. If you would, by the way, thank you so much for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith's got the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.